The rain hadn't stopped for hours. It drummed on the windows like skeletal fingers tapping in a pattern just shy of language. Outside Julian Morrow's study, the wind curled around the eaves like it was trying to find a way in. He sat hunched at his desk, the low amber light of a desk lamp casting sharp shadows across piles of old books, unopened letters, and a half-drunk glass of scotch. He wasn't expecting any more mail, not at this hour, not on a night like this. So when the envelope slid under the door with a dry whisper, no knock, no footsteps, Julian froze. He stared at it. A strange kind of dread bloomed in his chest, subtle but persistent, like the twinge of a distant memory clawing its way forward. The envelope was made of thick, yellowed parchment. The wax seal was black and unbroken, stamped with an unfamiliar crest, a looping symbol that seemed to shift when he stared at it too long. The handwriting was unmistakable. Eleanor Voss. He hadn't seen that name in over a decade, not since the fire. His fingers trembled as he broke the seal. The paper inside crackled like dried leaves. It was a single line, written in her slanted, elegant script. "Come see me. One night only. Voss House. Midnight." Julian read it 3 times. The room suddenly felt colder, though the window was shut and the radiator hissed with heat. A deep, unnameable unease crept up the back of his neck. Eleanor was dead. That much he remembered too well. The fire had gutted the Voss estate 10 years ago, an inferno that lit up the sky and left nothing but scorched beams and shattered porcelain. Her body was never officially recovered, but the whispers in town were all the same. No one could have survived. Julian had grieved in his own quiet way, burying her memory beneath layers of lectures, whiskey, and long silent nights. He had never gone back to Voss House. He had never stopped dreaming of her either. And now this. He turned the envelope over again as though expecting a second message, a trick, a joke. But the parchment was cold, damp at the edges. Real, tangible, and that was the most disturbing part. Julian stood moving slowly, like someone waking from a dream. He opened the top drawer of his desk and pulled out a revolver. Old, well-maintained, inherited from his father, who'd used it only once to scare off a would-be burglar. Julian had never fired it, but he loaded it now, the soft clink of each bullet far too loud in the silence. Next, he grabbed a bottle of Bordeaux from the cabinet, Eleanor's favorite, oddly enough. It felt like an offering, or maybe a peace treaty. He wasn't sure why he brought it. Nostalgia, maybe, guilt, love, still stubborn and undying. The drive to the Voss estate was a blur of slick roads, black trees, and headlights swallowed by fog. No radio, no music. Just the mechanical hum of the engine and Julian's heartbeat, steady but sharp like a warning bell. He felt the weight of the revolver beneath his coat. The bottle of wine was in the passenger seat belted in like a fragile guest. When he arrived at the estate, his breath caught. The Voss house stood tall at the end of a winding gravel drive, its white facade untouched by time or fire. The windows glowed faintly, warm yellow light spilling through lace curtains. The porch lamp flickered, casting long shadows that swayed in rhythm with the wind. It looked exactly as it had the last time he'd seen it, before the fire, before the tragedy, before everything. As Julian stepped out of the car, the wind hit him like a wall of cold breath. The trees loomed like mourners. The rain had stopped, but the air hung heavy, tasting faintly of iron and burnt sugar. He approached the front door with slow, deliberate steps, the gravel crunching beneath his boots like bones breaking underfoot. And there, Nailed to the front door with a long, rusted spike was a sheet of paper. His obituary: Julian Morrow, born 1981, died tonight. The blood drained from his face. His hand went instinctively to the revolver, but still, he reached for the door. It creaked open before he touched it. The house was waiting, and so was she. Julian parked the car at the edge of the long gravel path, where the fog clung to the earth like a second skin. The road behind him had long since vanished into a veil of gray mist, and even with the headlights on, the trees ahead were no more than vague silhouettes, brittle, blackened things that looked more dead than dormant. Voss House loomed in the distance, its sharp Victorian angles emerging from the fog like a memory too vivid to forget. He could see the white shutters, spotless, unweathered by time or flame. The porch lights flickered softly as though they'd been expecting him. The house should have been a ruin. It had burned. Everyone had seen it. And yet here it stood, whole, unscarred, and impossibly pristine. As Julian stepped out of the car, the ground beneath his feet gave a subtle squish. Mud soaked from the storm, but with a strange texture, too soft, almost sponge-like. The smell in the air hit him immediately, burnt sugar and rot, sweet at first, almost nostalgic, then cloying, turning to something bitter that curled in the back of his throat. He walked slowly, each footstep crunching on the gravel with unnatural volume. There were no insects buzzing, no wind rustling the bare branches, just silence. And the faintest sound, a piano. Somewhere deep inside the house, a song played, something classical, broken slightly by a single wrong note, repeated like a stutter. Over and over, the melody tugged at a forgotten place in his memory. Eleanor used to play that song. Chopin, he thought, but slower now, with something off in the rhythm, like the house itself had learned the tune from her but didn't quite understand how to play it anymore. Julian paused at the foot of the porch. He could feel the weight of the bottle of wine tucked under his arm and the firm press of the revolver in his coat pocket. The porch light buzzed above his head, blinking like a tired eye. The front door was tall, deep oak, with the same intricate carving he remembered, interwoven vines, serpents, and what had once looked like roses, now warped into unfamiliar shapes. Then he saw it, nailed to the center of the door. A sheet of paper, yellowed and curled at the corners, pinned with a nail rusted dark red. His name, Julian Thomas Morrow. A date, October 18th, 2025. Today. Beloved son, respected professor, lost to memory. His obituary, written in typeset font, with no listed cause of death. No location, just a period, final, full stop. His hand hovered near the paper, then drew back. The edges looked wet, too dark to be water. Something had bled onto it from the nail, forming irregular patterns beneath his name. He felt a pull in his stomach, like the ground was tilting under him. For a brief moment, he imagined this was it, that crossing this threshold would end him, that he would simply disappear, absorbed by the house like so many others whispered about in old town legends. But then he remembered Eleanor's letter, her handwriting, her name, her call, and damn him, he wanted to see her again. Julian reached for the doorknob. It was warm, not just from the house's interior heat, warm like freshly held skin, like someone had just opened it from the other side. A creak echoed faintly from within, followed by the soft fall of footsteps, far too distant for how close they sounded. He hesitated, his fingers wrapped around the knob. The music grew louder, closer now, and the wrong note repeated again, deliberately. Thunk, thunk, pause, thunk. He turned the knob. The door opened with a sigh, not a groan, as if the house had been waiting, patiently, eagerly. The air inside was still, heavy, as though it hadn't been disturbed in years, but lacked even the scent of dust. Instead, that same burnt sugar rot hovered in every breath. The hallway stretched before him, long and narrow, lined with oil paintings that watched without faces, features blurred like melting wax. The walls pulsed subtly, breathing in silence, and far down the corridor a light flickered. The music played on, slow and broken. Julian took a step forward. The floor didn't creak beneath his weight. It yielded slightly, like carpet soaked in something thick and unspoken. Behind him, the door clicked shut. He didn't turn around. Somehow, he knew it had no handle on the inside. The house had remembered him, and now it had him. The bottle of wine trembled slightly in his hand. The revolver felt heavier. He forced himself to walk deeper into the hallway, each step swallowed by the silence. The piano was playing her song, but was it really Eleanor playing it? Or something else, wearing her memory like a mask? The hallway seemed to stretch for miles. Julian moved slowly, cautiously, his hand brushing the revolver beneath his coat. The silence pressed in around him, broken only by the haunting melody drifting from the parlor. The piano was louder now, but no keys moved. He could see them clearly from across the threshold, playing themselves with invisible fingers, like the house was remembering the music on its own. And then he saw her, Eleanor. She stood at the far end of the room, framed by the flickering chandelier, her body bathed in warm amber light. She looked exactly as she had 10 years ago, not older, not different, not even slightly aged. Her dark hair was swept over one shoulder in a loose cascade of curls, and she wore a deep crimson evening gown that shimmered like blood beneath candlelight. The fabric clung to her in all the places he remembered, except now, where her collarbone peeked through the neckline. A jagged burn scar licked across her skin, raw, textured, like the last fingerprint of flame. She smiled, and something in Julian's chest seized. "I knew you'd come, Jules," she said, her voice honey smooth and hollow at the edges. "You always said you'd come back for me." The room didn't move, but it felt like it breathed with her words. Julian opened his mouth, then closed it again. 1,000 thoughts knotted in his throat. Questions, warnings, love, maybe. He stepped forward, the floor swallowing the sound of his footfalls. "Eleanor," he said quietly, How are you here?" She drifted across the room with unnatural grace, like her feet weren't touching the floor. She reached for his hand, her skin cool and slightly damp. Eleanor leaned against the piano, one hand tracing invisible notes. The keys continued to depress and rise, slow and rhythmic, as though the room itself was playing host. Then, with sudden, eerie delight, she danced. Her red dress fanned out like petals around her. The motion was fluid, too fluid, her limbs bending at strange angles, as though her bones remembered the choreography, but had forgotten how to move like a person. She twirled silently, her eyes closed. Julian's stomach churned. He tried to focus on her beauty, the way he remembered her. But every time she turned, every time the firelight kissed her face, something was different. Her smile was always just a little too wide. Her skin too smooth, too unblemished, except for the burn, which looked deeper now, almost glowing. And her eyes. Whenever he looked away, even for a moment, her eyes changed. He noticed it first when he glanced at the fireplace. When he turned back, she was staring at him, unmoving, with eyes that were too open. No blinking, no softness, just void black pupils, impossibly wide, like a reflection in a warped mirror. He cleared his throat. "Eleanor, what happened to you?" She stopped dancing, her head tilted. The piano stopped without a sound. Then she smiled again. Only now it didn't reach her eyes. "Time is soft here," she said, "and it's always hungry." Julian's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the hardwood. The wine splattered, but the color was darker than red. It was too thick, too alive. It seeped toward the baseboards like it was crawling. His reflection caught in the cracked mirror above the mantel, except it didn't. He stepped forward. No reflection, not a blur, not a shimmer, just nothing. The room behind him, Eleanor dancing. Yes, but no Julian. He turned sharply. Eleanor hadn't moved, but her face had shifted again, subtly stretched, her cheekbones slightly too high, her mouth a half-inch too far to the side, like a mask pulled tight. Her gaze was fixed on him, unblinking. "You said you'd never forget me," she whispered. Julian's hand went to the revolver. It felt like a toy now, useless against whatever this was. He tried to stand, but the room swayed. The house breathed in. Eleanor took a step closer, and Julian realized it wasn't just the wine. The house was changing him, pulling him in, reshaping the memory of him into something it could keep. Julian woke to the sound of rain hitting leaves. His head throbbed, each pulse of pain like a hammer behind his eyes. The scent of burnt wood, wet moss, and old earth filled his nostrils. He lay on the forest floor, his coat torn and caked with mud. Blood streaked his shirt, dried in some places, fresh in others. A long, jagged cut ran across his left arm, the flesh raw and swollen. His first breath was shallow. The second came with a name. Eleanor. He sat up slowly, vision spinning. Around him, the forest loomed in gray silence. The sun had risen, or tried to, but the sky above was smothered by a veil of colorless clouds. In the distance, where the Voss House had once stood, there was nothing but ash. The skeletal outline of the mansion was scorched into the ground, blackened beams twisted like ribs from the earth. Smoke still curled from the center, rising in lazy spirals that seemed reluctant to leave. The house was gone. He had escaped, somehow. But the memory clung to him like oil. Her face, her voice, the breath of the house, that unnatural smile. The taste of ashes still coated his tongue. And worst of all, the music, that broken piano tune, off-key and looping, it hadn't stopped. It was softer now, tucked deep in his mind, but every night since, it had returned in his sleep, like a lullaby for the damned. Weeks passed. The police dismissed his report within minutes. No signs of foul play. No one else had received a letter. No one could verify the house had even been rebuilt before the fire. According to the county registry, the Voss estate had remained in ruins since 2015. They said Julian must have fallen, hit his head, got lost in the woods. The obituary he claimed to have found, no sign of it. They humored him, ran a few basic tests, then told him to get rest. He moved back into his apartment, 6th floor, old brick building, cluttered with books and bitter memories. The days dragged. He tried to distract himself with lectures and grading papers. but his hand shook when he tried to write. Whole lines blurred, letters twisted into shapes he didn't remember making. He disconnected the piano in his living room. It still played at night, without strings. Sometimes, when he turned too quickly, he thought he saw her. Just a shadow at the corner of the hallway, a flicker of red in the mirror that vanished when he looked again. He hadn't spoken her name aloud since the fire.